Austin. Welcome to Rock Book Show. And joining me via Skype today, I love when people just pop into my computer. The very, very prolific Joel McIver. It's so nice to meet you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be on your show. Thank you so much.
Oh my God. And I'm really loving this guitar collection.
Kim is looking directly into my office near London in England. And I'm, as well as writing books, I'm the editor of Bass Guitar magazine over here. So I've got a whole rack of basses here, obviously. And in fact, you're looking directly into the man cave in my house where all the stuff gets done.
You know, one of the reasons we're getting together today is because you have this cool new book coming out with Dave Ellefson of Megadeth. And you are co-author. Joel, what's this like when you get your name in the tiny print here?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's great. I mean, especially next to someone like that who, I mean, when I was a teenager, I would read Kerrang! And I would read about Ellefson and Dave Mustaine and the band. And to have my name on the cover, same cover as one of those guys, is amazing. You know, it's huge. The next book after this is Max Cavalera's book as well. So I've got those two coming up. So at the moment I'm walking around like, God, this is amazing. And, you know, I remember that the first book I did came out in 2000. And I remember phoning home because my wife had received the first shipment of books. And I said, what's it like? What's it like? And she said, oh my God, you've got your name on the cover. And that thrill has never really gone away, actually. It's lovely.
And I was reading, too, that a lot of times fans will bring your books for bands to sign.
They do. They do that. That's a huge compliment as well. You know, and the most bands are happy with that. You know, if you write a decent book about them, they're keen. A couple of them are like, whoa, why didn't you? You know, you should have got us to approve it. Although I've never really had many problems along those lines. But, you know, occasionally you won't know how a subject will respond. And this doesn't relate to this book that we're talking about now, obviously, because it's actually Ellefson's book that I just co-wrote as his helper, as it were. But quite often when you write an unauthorized biography of a band and then you meet them 5 years later and they're like, you're the guy that wrote that book, you know. Hopefully they're not going to say, well, there were mistakes all over it, like page 26 had this terrible error. But I've never had that, but only a matter of time.
You just, as I mentioned, you're so prolific since 2000. What's the tally of books now that your own and co-authored?
I've done 22, and that's not including the forthcoming ones this year. So, yeah, and then there's about another 50 in foreign languages. So I've got them all in my front room here at home. Sort of prominently placed, so that visitors say, hey, what's this? And I say, oh, it's just my books, you know, just something I do in my spare time. So tons. At least 2 hectares of rainforest is dead because of me, unfortunately.
And still writing a lot for magazines and digitally and online and all that good stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff, you know. I mean, I was out with, you probably know Mick Wall, the author of many great books. I was out with him the other night for a drink, and we were saying how he and I are really the only authors in this country, at least, who do this full time. There are lots of people who write books about rock music, but mostly they have a day job to sustain them, like their teachers or their whatever, you know. But he and I do only this. And it's a source of great pride to us, actually, that we manage to do it, because you know what it's like when you're self-employed. It doesn't matter what your job is. Running business is tough. And especially nowadays when not only the music industry is in free form, so is the book publishing industry. So all that, you know, it harks back to your original question about what's it like to see your name on the cover of a book. It's very, very gratifying because it's not easy to do unless, as Mick and I have found, you know, you get some momentum rolling after a few years. You have a few successful titles, and then, you know, we're very lucky that people keep asking us to do stuff.
That's actually what I was going to ask you. Do people come to you now then? Yeah,
so it works in several ways. I have an agent here in London and another one in New York, and publishers in either country may go straight to the agent and say, well, so-and-so wants to do a book. Have you got a decent author? Or I may come up with an idea, or a musician may approach me and say, well, look, we want to do a book with you. So it works in a variety of ways. The main thing is that you have an agent who handles the contracts and is there to fight for you and get a good deal. We have a fantastic agent, David Ellefson, and I, called Lisa Gallagher, who's in New York. And she put together this wonderful deal with Simon & Schuster, which is all very good, you know. I can't wait for people to read it. There's all sorts of crazy stuff in there. You should have seen the stuff we couldn't put in.
But they're seared in your memory.
It's all there. Maybe one day when he's old, he'll put out another one with the whole thing in, you know. But as of now, Ellefson's book has a bit of a different message. It's not just a sort of book of debauchery and rock and roll exploits, although those things are in there. So he's been a devout Christian for a good 20 years now. And my mission was to get that message down in the book without falling into the trap that a lot of Christian rockers fall into, which is that people don't take them seriously, and that they come across as kind of really kind of watered down and embarrassing to heavy metal people, you know. And David Ellefson is fully aware of this, you know. He understands about bands we won't name any names, but overtly Christian musicians in heavy metal, which can be can make you cringe a little bit, and he is not that kind of man at all. And that's one of the things that this book portrays. And that was a challenge, because most people, the standard heavy metal fan, of which I am one, I admit, you will hear that a certain heavy metal person has turned to Christ, and you go, no, that's the end of the good music, and it was one of the missions was to make that not the case in this book. So anyway, I think I pulled it off.
And you did a lot of it via Skype?
Yeah, just like you and I are now, because not only do we live in different continents, but also Megadeth have been on tour. Endlessly since he rejoined the band 3 years ago. So that was great. We did a lot of funny time scheduling, like he would be on 5 a.m. in Japan, and I would be on, midnight or whatever here. And he would set up his laptop in his hotel room and sort of fire it up, and we would chat. And to his credit, he would be able to say, okay, so we're in 1993, we're talking about Countdown to Extinction, and he would snap right into it with the help of some strong coffee, I think. That's the way of the modern world. The other way of doing it, which I have done, is you fly over and you go and stay with someone for a couple of weeks in their house, and they devote their time solely to their autobiography, and you have a few drinks and you go and visit some old sort of landmarks from their youth, which might trigger interesting stories. And that's another good way to do it. And it's a very emotive experience, Kim. You really get into these people's heads and you become friends. And without sounding too pathetic, it is kind of an immersive sort of therapy situation, because you're there. You're not just writing down what they say. You have to push them and guide them and pull them in different directions and say, okay, we've talked a lot about this particular area of your life. Let's explore another direction. And you may find that they haven't come out in sufficient detail about a particular thing that the readers would want to know about. They may skirt around difficult issues or embarrassing issues, and you have to say, look, I'm sorry, but this happened. You have to talk about this. And then on the other hand, they have terrible things. People have sad bereavements in their lives and sad times, and you have to tackle those in a sensitive way. You can't be like sort of pig-headed and say, right, come on, let's talk about this. You must talk about this right now. Clearly, so there's a lot of sensitivity involved, which makes it all the better when it comes out and it works.
I actually was kind of curious about that, if this is kind of an egoless job.
In a sense it is, because I want to retain David's voice in the book. It's not my voice. But on the other hand, it has to be, because my job is I'm a writer, I know how to write books. It's professionalized and sort of smooth, and I can sense where the peaks and troughs are in the book, and where the chapters end, where we need to focus. But it's not me that's making these points. It's not my voice. In fact, it was funny. The only autobiography that I've co-written before this was of Glenn Hughes of Deep Purple, Black Country Communion. Glenn's an English guy, so we spoke the same language with the same vocabulary and the same grammar and the same spelling. Obviously, that wasn't the case with David, so I had to Americanize my writing. And I thought that would be simple, right? You just throw in a Z into analyze and realize instead of an S. A catalog doesn't have a UE on the end, but actually a lot of Britishisms snuck in, and I was like, oh God, another one's gone in. I've spelled that word wrong again. It was funny. It was good fun. We had great times. We spent 3 years on it. And I can't wait to see the final thing now.
Is there anybody's life that you didn't want to leave, or that you really couldn't wait to leave?
No, I've never had a bad experience doing this. I've actually only done 3 books. I've done Glenn's, David's, and Max Cavalera's. And those 3 guys made it very, very easy for me, largely because they're extremely keen to do it. There's another guy whose name I cannot reveal, a well-known bass player in a very well-known band who you know. And I'll probably let you have an exclusive on that in due course. He had a difficult life, and we got through most of it, but it was hard work because his life was so tragic. In some cases, you have to dig deep. Max, for example. So Max Cavalera, lovely guy, good friend, but he's a kind of a man's man in many ways. Doesn't like to dig too deep emotionally. But that's no good for an autobiography, because what the reader wants is for you to share and give yourself emotionally to them. You're opening up to people. And so I had to dig deep with Max, and he responded. I totally got what we needed. And it is a very emotional book, and he's lived a very tragic life, and as we know. But I had to push a little bit with him. Whereas with Glenn Hughes, who's the sort of friendliest, most open guy in the world. You know, he'll go and give you a hug the first time you meet him, and you're friends for life. He was very, very happy to throw open everything and doesn't hide anything. And a lot of these guys are post-rehab anyway, post-rehab, post-therapy, so they're very good at doing that. So it's just an example of the differing approaches that you need with these people, because everyone's had a different life.
Why do you think these books are so popular now, Joel? Like both the biographies and the memoirs.
Not really sure. The market is saturated for sure.
Yeah.
With rock books, and I'm partly responsible for that, of course. But I'm not. I just don't know. Maybe the doors were thrown open by Slash's book and by the Motley Crue book, which was so amazing, so horrible, but so amazing. You know, at the same time. And everybody realised, wow, maybe it's because the mainstream publishing world realised that actually these crazy heavy metal guys who they had previously ignored actually had insanely interesting lives. Whereas the musicians in Coldplay or One Direction or, whichever Maroon 5 or whichever band you want to think of, perhaps didn't have such an interesting existence, an interesting career. That's all I can think. Quite rapidly, the idea of the book as a sort of Bible and litany of debauchery has kind of gone out of the window now. I mean, Slash did a bit of it. The Dirt obviously was all about that. My Glenn Hughes book had quite a bit of that in it. But and I suppose Stephen Adler's book, which I read not long ago, was full of that stuff. Nikki Sixx's book. And I think now people are starting to look for a little more depth, which certainly is the case in these two latest books that I've done with Ellefson and Cavalera. Rex Brown's book wasn't really about that at all. It was about deeper things. But I mean, what I hope it encourages is for people like Prince, to do a book, and people like Tom Waits and people, not just sort of the heavy metal people that we know and love, but the broader musical world. And hopefully now there's a sort of thriving publishing environment for those books. I hope that does happen.
So Prince and Tom Waits, are they a couple of your dream guests?
Oh, yeah, so much. Yeah. I mean, I imagine it would be incredibly difficult for both of those guys because of who they are. They're not the most open men in the world when it comes to talking about things, and they would have their own kind of sort of confidants and people who are close to them who would do that job anyway. I spoke to Lars Ulrich a couple of years ago. I kind of floated the idea of a book, and he said, "You know what? People talk to me about this all the time, but I know where all the bodies are buried." And I said, "No, I appreciate that fully, but it's not like you have to reveal all those things." And we kind of laughed about it, But that would be an interesting book, definitely.
So I read on your Facebook page you have this Rage Against the Machine book coming out.
That's right. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, this is the very first bit of press I'm doing for that. Then.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. I've only written like half of it. It's coming. I've got to hand it in on the 1st of October. If my publishers are here listening to this, no, I've written much more than half of it. It's almost done. I'm in the final editing stages. In fact, I'm going to send it over tomorrow. Yes, all right. So the cool thing there is I have written about almost every metal band under the sun. Always been a huge fan of Rage Against the Machine, particularly that first album. And I happened to have got to know Tom Morello a bit because he helped me out with the Glenn Hughes book, because those two are friends. So he gave me a nice quote for Glenn's book. And I thought, I'd love to do a Rage Against the Machine book. A British publisher called Omnibus commissioned me to do one. I emailed Tom and said, why don't we make this the official one? He emailed me back, which was good of him, and said, look, I'd love to be involved, but the other three guys just will not do any press, whether it's for a book, whether it's for a magazine. They just will not. They're completely done with it. They're burned out. And I get that. And he didn't want to be the sole voice, And he said, so you have my blessing to go ahead and do it, So just go ahead and do an unauthorized one, And that I have to stress that unauthorized does not mean no good, just as authorized doesn't necessarily mean good, right? So the idea here is, without getting too earnest, is that I want to look in depth at the political things that they talk about, as well as just, in 1991, they formed a band and they supported Tool and blah, blah, blah. So in between the chapters, there is a sort of what I think is an interesting in-depth analysis of the various political causes that they have espoused, whether it's the Zapatistas in Mexico, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's the war on terror, the various presidents, their involvement with Noam Chomsky, the linguist and politician, political thinker. So as well as, the short answer is, as well as being the straight story of that band with lots of interesting insights into their deepest past, it's also a political analysis without being really boring, that makes people want to pass out with boredom. So that's an interesting new approach for me, and that's what I've been occupying my time with for the last few months since the Ellefson book was completed. And so I think they're going to put that out in first quarter next year.
And do you have a title yet?
We're going to call it Know Your Enemy.
Okay, very cool.
So, we had various ideas knocking about, including the obvious, killing in the name or whatever. I've got like 6 books on the go, and
Wow.
most of them I haven't I can't really announce yet because they're only just in the opening stages. But there's plenty to do. That's for sure.
Both your own and co-authoring?
Mostly my own. There's a couple of co-authors coming up. Two sort of well-known metal guys. And I'll announce that a little bit further down the line when things are firmed up a little bit.
Fantastic.
So yeah, loads to do, plenty to do, but lots of fun. You know, there's still lots of time for some debauchery at the weekends, Kim. I know you have some of that too.
It was so much fun to have you here. Stay with me, but I'm going to pretend that we're leaving. So thanks so much for being here, Joel. It's so nice to talk to you.
Oh, come on, it's so much fun. I look forward to hearing the edit.
Get out of here.